Hari Om. Anyone here? Alexa, what time is it?
It's 6:17 p.m.
Hi, Jim.
I think I may have logged on before you. Do I need to log off?
Yeah, I can't claim host right now.
Okay, I will log off and you log on.
Okay.
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tat Padam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata Chapita Twameva, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha Twameva, Twameva Vedya Dravinam Twameva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we're in the 5th chapter, starting tonight with verse 15, and the topic under discussion is this renunciation of the sense of agency. Most of us in a state of ignorance think that I, the individual, choose, I act. And then along with that means I am responsible for all my terrible mistakes, and I take all the glory for all my successes, and I have to worry about the future so that I will choose the right path ahead. And what Krishna has been saying is that's a complete misunderstanding of the mechanics of action. That the actor are the qualities of mind and the force of the past. It's very, very mechanical. Essentially, it's the strongest vasana at the present that impels us into desire, choice, then action. The self is ever the uninvolved, untouched witness of it all. His invitation is to watch life go by. Watch the stream of life go by, as if you were sitting on the bank of a river and you're watching everything just go by. I am never touched by it. All right, 15th verse, please. Will you help us out, Deepa?
Sure. Nadatte kasyachit papam na chaiva sukritam vibhu ajnanenavritam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. The Lord takes neither the demerit nor even the merit of any. Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance. Thereby beings are deluded.
So, the idea of punya and papam, merit and demerit, or we can say our worldly ideas of honor and dishonor, success and failure, those are judgments that the human mind makes. Successful or unsuccessful actions. So when we talk about karma, which this whole idea of merit and demerit refers to, the dharma of the body is karma. It is the body that acts, and it is to the body that the results of past actions accrue. The mind has its feelings about it, the intellect has its ideas about it, but the self, Krishna, is never touched by any of it. Now, let me see if I can give you an example of this. Very worldly. As many of you know, I used to be the music director at St. Augustine's Catholic Church. Saturday evening at 5 o'clock, we had Mass. And I was usually the cantor, the singer at that Mass, and I had this marvelous pianist. His name was Ron Harbour, played. And he's forgotten more about music than I'll ever know. He's just brilliant. Anyway, he was supposed to arrive at 4:30 for rehearsal for 5 o'clock Mass. So there was this one particular Saturday, 4:30 comes and he's not there. 4:35, he's not there. 4:40, he's not there. He comes in at 4:45. Now, Jim was being righteously indignant and passive aggressive. Ron, you're late. And my expectation is that he would go, oh, I'm so sorry, I had this. He would not take it on. He just let it pass through. He just would not feel guilty, no matter how much of a guilt trip I was trying to lay on him. And I just started to laugh. Inside, I was thinking, Jai, good yogi. He's not a yogi, but he, at an intuitive level, knew this. He just does not take that kind of stuff on. We sat down, we got to work, we got enough rehearsal done to do the service. But the thing is, what would have been accomplished by, first of all, me foolishly trying to make him feel guilty. And secondly, him feeling guilty, taking on that merit or demerit. Far better is to be solution oriented. Let's get to work and rehearse and get ready for the service. So there's an enormous practicality to this. That's my point. Enormous practicality. Nothing in this world is important enough for us to lose our peace of mind. Let it go. Any thoughts on this principle? Now, for the fool who thinks I do, I act, it is like, in this one, was it smoke enveloping a fire, Deepa? I'm having a total senior moment.
Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance.
Yes. So it was the prior verse where we had, like the womb covers the fetus, like smoke envelops the fire. So the knowledge of my self-nature is covered by ignorance. Now, this is a reference to, again, something very mechanical and something very technical. So let's go to the dream state, because if you really clearly understand the dream state, Vedanta becomes very clear. So in the dream state, prior to your dreaming, you are the waker. And then you go through your various rituals for becoming sleepy. You go to bed, and then you fall asleep. That's the mind state you go into, sleep. The characteristic of sleep is pure ignorance. It is characterized by the non-apprehension of myself as the waker. Then I have another phenomenon, the projecting power. The dream appears, and I have a dream body with a dream ego where I'm identified with it, in a dream world, dream thoughts and feelings, etc. But the precondition to the illusion of the dream is the ignorance of deep sleep. So also, when I am in the state of knowing Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Nothing's going to touch me. Nothing's going to harm me. It's all going to be okay. The world is all Brahman. It's just going to unfold. It's fine. If ignorance covers me, Varana Shakti, I have the non-apprehension of myself as Brahman. Then there's Vikshepa Shakti, the projecting power. I think I'm Jim. And then there's a world of name and form and struggle. And I'm dealing with how am I doing? What do they think of me? Am I okay? I, me, mine, I, me, mine, I, me, mine. But that identification with the ego is like when I identify with the dream body and ego. Now, listen very carefully. The shift between the dreamer and the waker is a gross shift. The alarm goes off, and you go, whang. Mutually exclusive states. the shift between knowledge of myself and being identified with ego is a subtle shift, equally mutually exclusive. If you think you're a person, you're deluded. If you know you're Brahman, your mind is clear. Mutually exclusive. But it's incredibly subtle. When ignorance overcomes my mind and then I think I am the doer, I think I am an agent. I'm caught up in what we call this sense of agency. When I can drop that, hang on, we've got motorcycles going by, and I see I am not the doer. I'm the witness. It is the body, mind, intellect that's the doer. Now, let's talk a little bit about punya and papa, merit and demerit. So, Lord Shiva has two eyes, just like you and me. The mystic symbolism is good, evil, success, failure, merit, demerit, right, wrong, pleasure, suffering. But Lord Shiva has a third eye, which is the non-dual eye. It's the jnana chakshu, the eye of wisdom. And what's the mythology? When Lord Shiva opens his eye, what happens to the world? Gets burnt to ashes. Doesn't mean, apocalypse. It doesn't mean that. It means the world that everybody sees, where I'm an ego and the world is out there with its joy-giving and misery-producing qualities. It is no longer available. Instead, I see the play of the Lord happening all the time. The substratum consciousness is never touched by. Now, before class, we were talking a little bit about the Christian symbolism, because today is Palm Sunday in the Christian calendar. In the Gospel of John, I think it's in Gospel of John, there are a bunch of statements that Jesus makes. We think that they may have been taken from an earlier work that was just a list of sayings of Jesus. One of them, and it has no preparation and no explanation afterward, but it says, if thine eye be single, thy whole body will be filled with light. Nobody talks about it. What does it mean for a dualistic Christian? I don't know. But for a yogi, it's incredibly clear. He's talking about that same jnana chakshu, the eye that sees beyond duality. Me and the world. It's the eye that sees all is Brahman, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. And the only real agent is Ishvara himself. Any thoughts on this? All right, next one.
Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashitamatmanah tesham adityavajnanam prakashayati tatparam. But to those whose ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self, like the sun, to them knowledge reveals the supreme, Brahman.
Yes. So, when ignorance is destroyed by knowledge. So, we have to understand how does all our various all our various yogic practices fit into this? What about doing asana? What about doing puja? What about doing pranayama? What about doing tirtha pilgrimages? What about all the various things, charity, etc.? Should we do these things or should we not? Karma yoga, should we do these things? Yes, they are preparatory. What do? They subtleize the subtle intellect so that the mind becomes sattvic, clear and pure. In that very pure mind, we can engage in Atma Vichara, investigation into the nature of the self. Can it be done in a gross mind? It's ineffective. Put that practice on the shelf, do upasana, do karma yoga. Then, when the mind naturally starts to turn inward, we can take up the practice of inquiry into the self. Now, actions do not destroy ignorance because actions do not contradict or in opposition to ignorance. There's an old story about the king who drank too much. And he smoked a little bit of bomb. So he gets loaded one night and he goes to bed and doesn't sleep too well because he's high. He wakes up in the middle of the night and his sleeping chamber is dark. And in his delusion, he starts to yell for the courtiers and the ministers to come and sweep out the darkness. They come with their brooms and they're sweeping away. So can you sweep out darkness? No. Because sweeping is not opposed to darkness. Finally, one of the ministers comes in with a lantern and the darkness is dispelled. So we can do all these actions and they do not deal with the root of the problem, which is spiritual ignorance. How do we deal with ignorance? We investigate and find out. We get direct knowledge of who I am. Now, there are two kinds of knowledge that we're going to be dealing with here. This is a secret. There is a perfect knowledge, an eternal knowledge. And that is the self-evidence of the self. How do you know you are you? You don't see, taste, touch, smell, or hear yourself. You don't emote yourself. You don't think yourself. Oh my gosh, I must not exist because I don't do those things. Well, aren't you you? Yeah. How do you know you are you? You are self-evident. You are Swayambhu. You are self-luminous, self-jyoti. I am the knower. The means of knowledge is me. That which is known is me, but not like an object. To try to show someone the self is like trying to show them their eyes. Yet you are. Now, the great cosmic joke is everybody already has that. And their self is just as self-evident as any saint. So what is it that changes? It's the subtle intellect. It's the subtle intellect that has this aha. What happens is in a mind made very pure, you can begin to see the space between your thoughts. See if you can notice who sees the thoughts and the space between the thoughts. Look behind your eyes. Notice the noticer. Who are you? And then in the subtle intellect, it gets this aha. It goes, oh, there's nothing there. I'm not a person. I'm just the vast empty space of consciousness. It doesn't create the self. You don't achieve the self. You don't become the self. Your self doesn't improve. In the subtle intellect, you get this recognition, this aha. Oh, aham brahmasmi, I am that Brahman. Not just as information you've read in a book, but as your direct experience. So Yoga Vasishta says, both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. What is bondage? There is no other bondage than the deeply rooted conviction that I'm bound. Meaning I think I'm my body. I think I'm a person. There is no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction in the subtle intellect, based on direct experience. Not that I'm an enlightened person, but that I am Brahman. And you see that no personal sense of self is real. This is the knowledge that destroys ignorance. Don't believe me. Don't believe Lord Krishna. You go look, find out. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Tatputyastadaत्मान Stannishthaastatparayana Gacchantya Punaravrittim Jnana-nirdhutakalmashaha. Intellect absorbed in that, their self being that, established in that, with that for the supreme goal, they go whence there is no return, their sins dispelled by the knowledge.
Yes. So their intellect absorbed in that. when the intellect grasps the no thingness of the self, it becomes stupefied. It ends. It becomes no mind. When I see I am that, self-realization basically just gives us two things. The first I call existential freedom. I know nothing ever changes me, touches me, can harm me, can improve me, can benefit me, can detract from me. I am kutusta, stable like a mountain. The second thing is I finally know where happiness is. Happiness is the intellect absorbed in the self, is the mind reveling in the self. Tune up the mind, Swamiji would say. Come home, hurry home. Hari Om, he would say. This is why it is important to have a meditative practice. Those of us who are studying Vivekachudamani, we're going to start a discussion on samadhi soon. The practice of samadhi. Now, there's a very practical reason around this. The ruthless rule of the mind is this: the mind will return to the experience that's given it the greatest joy, the greatest juice. If not in practice, at least in fantasy, in imagination. This is why things like drug-driven sex are so hard to let go of for drug addicts, because it's so euphoric. Thank God yourself is the most beloved, or we all be in a pickle. So you have to have the direct experience of the bliss of your own self-nature. At least once. And it's so pure, so endless, it's so clean. And there's no end to how deeply the mind can revel in the self. Even if you only have a taste of it once, maybe by being around a guru, maybe at a meditation retreat or spontaneously, your mind will remember it, and it will then become the driver to move you even further into the spiritual life. In the end, yes, we need to give up the bliss of samadhi, but don't give it up till you have it. Don't give it up until you have it. And you can tell the difference between someone who can abide in the self and what we call the lip Vedantins, someone who has an intellectual grasp. They have the God talk down, but you just look at their lives and you can feel it if they're hankering after the world. You can feel it. Mind is still extroverting. Still extroverting. Why? The juice is out there. The juice is out there. The juice is out there. The woman of realization may be moving through the world, have a job, have a family, etc. But you can feel the difference. You're like an actor in a play. Ignorance-driven passion is gone. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Verse 18. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Shuni Chaiva Shvapake Cha Pandita Samadarshina. Sages look with an equal eye upon a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, on a cow, on an elephant, and even on a dog and an outcast.
So let's set aside the obvious classist references between Brahmanas and outcast. Think of it this way. The sage, the yogi, she looks on the world with this equality of vision. Everything is a manifestation of the divine. Now, what's implied here is a way in which we need to look at the world. So when we study Vivekachudamani, we put a lot of stress on the 7 questions. What is bondage? How has it come about? How does it continue to exist? How do I get out of it completely? Who is the real self? What is the not self? What's the process of discrimination between the two? Okay. When we go down that road, we are left still with 2 entities. You may know, oh, I am that witnessing consciousness. But what about this not self, this world? So in Yoga Vasishta, we have 3 questions. First one, who am I? The second question is, what is this world? And the third question, how has it come about? So our work is not complete until we answer those questions number 2 and number 3. So what do we need to do? We have to withdraw our raga and our dvesha, our passion for objects, gimme, 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 and our aversion, I'll never do that. And there are 2 practices. They seem contradictory, but they're not. From one viewpoint, we want to look at the world as like a dream. Mithya, illusion. Vaithatya, false. Pratibimba, like an image in a mirror, like a hologram, like a dream. Don't invest in it. It's just a picture show. Or we can look at it from this angle. It's all God and it's all good. In fact, the material cause of the universe is consciousness. It's Brahman. My problem is I love that person. I can't stand those 3 or 4. And the rest of the 6 or 7 billion, I don't give a damn. The practice is love all of them, everyone. So here Krishna is saying, a great Brahmana, very learned, very holy, no different than a cow, or a dog, or the janitor, or the Republican, or the Democrat, or the white supremacist, or the suffering refugee. Our job is to see them all as Krishna. To break our hearts open and have an enlarged heart. You need to have a broken heart and an enlarged heart. In the psychological world, I hear people talk about, oh, I need healthy boundaries. I'm working on my boundaries. Yoga says, have no boundaries. Be one with everyone and everything. Including my character defects and the character defects of everybody else. Those two are just forms of the Lord. Can I be open, not violent, not resistant, curious, and compassionate to it all? Liberated personality is one where there's no distinction between inside and outside. It's all God. It's all good. Any thoughts on this?
Hey, Jim, this is Katie. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Katie.
Hey, good evening. I'm wondering about your thoughts on this in terms of individual beings moving into pure consciousness, more highly attuning to the divine within, versus and the collective doing the same. And with sort of over time, sort of religious operationalizations of this, sort of seeking power, not actually getting in touch with the divine. And so sort of what I'm getting at is the individual roles, is the individual's role in moving one and the collective toward higher consciousness always focusing on the self? Is that always the dominant or dominating strategy, or is there any role in the individual in using one's individual agency to move the collective? Or is that's against yoga
No,
practice?
and each person lives according to their own swadharma, their own way in the world. So, for example, my grandfather Guru, Swami Tapovanam, he was so sensitive, so introverted. He wouldn't even come out of the Himalayas, lower than Rishikesh, up in the mountains. Most of the time he was up in Uttarkashi. He wouldn't come down to Haridwar or Varanasi or any of those places. He just didn't want to be around a whole lot of people with gross minds. He didn't teach vast numbers of people. He would only take one, maybe 2 or 3 students at a time. That was it. Very austere. Now, my guru, he was of the mind. He founded the Chinmaya mission. He said, India is now free. This is in, right after Indian independence. Now let's make Indians free. So he traveled the length, breadth of India tirelessly for 40 years, all over the world eventually, teaching tens of thousands of people. But that's what the Lord was working through him. Think of it this way. Not every body part has to be a nose. Some of us are thumbs and some of us are toes. Each fulfills their function in this great body. So all I can say is you will know what it is that you are supposed to do. But you can't give away something you haven't got. And this is where institutions get into trouble. It's very rare that an institution stays with the vision of its founder more than a couple generations. Because this work is hard. It's rare. And people get dogmatic and systematized. And then they pass on these forms, but there's no juice. Is that making sense, Katie?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Jim. Super helpful.
I'm reading a wonderful book. It's called Eager to Love by a Franciscan priest, Richard Rohr. And he's talking about what we call the Franciscan charism, the personality, the very essence of what it is to be a Franciscan. And he talks about how within a couple of generations, how the Catholic Church co-opted the Franciscan friars, the Franciscan brothers. And he talked about how the pure message was largely maintained by what they call the poor clares. These were the women who were the followers of Francis's sidekick, St. Clare. But they were what we call cloistered, meaning they stayed inside the convents. Very small order, mostly just in Assisi. They didn't see the whole world except from behind a screen. No one could see them. They did not get involved in the world. Now, here's another very interesting point. Who does more to change the world? The person marching in the streets with signs, protesting in the halls of Congress, or the yogini, she's sitting in a cave in the Himalayas, deep in samadhi, just emanating this spiritual force. It's a very interesting question, and I don't have an answer. But rather than dealing with systems and dealing with things theoretically, my invitation is you stay true to your own, what we call swadharma. That's where does your passion lead you? How are you going to spend yourself in love in the world? In the spirit of service. And I don't know. Only you can figure that out for yourself. Was that helpful?
Yes, very. Thank you, Jim.
You know, I have no doubt, we were talking about Holy Week, that Jesus was a great Mahatma. In India, he's considered an avatar. And great damage has been done by the institution of the church. Yoga is incredible, but great damage has been done by Hindu fundamentalists. This great truth is alive in Sufism, but great damage has been done by institutionalized Islam. No institution, religious or spiritual, seems to be able to avoid it. Yet, it is like the setting in which the jewel of deep mysticism resides. If there's not writing, if there are not followers, if there's not some sort of systemization, then in 1 generation it's lost, it's gone. The purest is in India the most traditional. And it's called the Guru Shishya Parampara. Guru means a teacher, a Shishya means a student or a disciple. Parampara means the transmission from the teacher to the taught. So in India, the essence of it is it's relational. It's two people in relationship with each other, tuned together so that this experience can be transmitted. Excellent question. Excellent question. Are there any other parts of it that you have doubts about, you want to ask more?
Oh, that's great. Super, super helpful. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, very good question. Anybody else have a question?
Hey Jim, it's Fang. I've got a quick question.
I can't hear you. You're speaking too softly.
Oh, hey Jim, sorry, it's Fang. I've got a quick question.
You'll have to get closer to your microphone.
Is this better?
Hello?
Is this better?
I can't hear you at all.
So strange. How's this?
I can hear you very softly. Let me get closer to mine. Okay, go ahead.
What I was going to ask is, when you said that at some point you had to give up the bliss of samadhi, what do you mean by that?
You get into samadhi, you enjoy the bliss of samadhi, and then you see that that's just another mind state. So you can't be attached to it.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? The importance of samadhi, Fang, though, is that it shows us by direct experience that myself, its nature is bliss absolute. It is the fountainhead of all joy. But it is a mind state. It comes and it goes. And you want to be beyond all mind states. Knowledge is about knowing who I am, my identity. We'll talk more about various samadhi states in a more advanced class than this. All right, next verse, please, Deepa.
Verse 19. Iheva terjita sargo yesham samye sthitam manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmad brahmani te sthita. Even here in this world, birth or everything is overcome by those whose minds rest in equality. Brahman is spotless indeed and equal, and therefore they are established in Brahman.
So in yoga, when we talk about the goal, we do not frame it as immortality. I'm going to live forever. It's not like the Christians, I'm going to go to this place called heaven and I'm going to be there with Aunt Mary and Uncle Joe, and the streets are going to be paved with gold and people are going to be playing harps. Although there are notions similar to that in Hinduism, going to Swarga, heaven realms, or Brahmaloka, something like that. No. We talk about moksha, liberation, as being freedom from birth. Most importantly, freedom from identifying with the body. Right here, right now, not in some afterlife. You can be free. And what the scriptures say is the cause for rebirth has been removed. The physical body is an instrument for the satisfaction of desire, for the garnering of experience. When the yogi has let go of all craving, then the cause for rebirth is gone. But you remain. You remain. Now, you do not need to believe in the doctrine of reincarnation to get value from this. You can say that you grew up in your parents' home and that was one incarnation. Then perhaps you went off to college, that was another incarnation. Now you're a professional person in the world, that's another incarnation. Maybe you're retired, that's another incarnation. Meaning, the environment has changed, your body has changed, your viewpoint has changed, but you have remained the same. So, thinking about the cause for rebirth. I'm living in Los Angeles. I don't like the traffic and I don't like the smog and I don't like the people and I hate my job, and more than that, my credit cards are maxed out. I think it would all be better if I moved to Chicago. They've got seasons in Chicago. It'll be better. Of course, what happens when you get to Chicago? Chicago is just as annoying as Los Angeles was. Because wherever you go, there you are. You take your mind with you. So the whole point here is reincarnation can be seen just as a form of what we call a geographic. If I change the outside circumstances, then it will be better. So what we want to do is not worry too much about the world and change our attitude toward it. So the yogi is at home anywhere. So the way I like to frame it is you want to sit with death on one shoulder. Live as if you're going to die soon. This is no rehearsal. This is it. Don't waste your time. But live with physical immortality on the other shoulder. What if you're going to be in the body for the rest of eternity? Now what are you going to do? Well, from either viewpoint, the answer is pretty much the same. Stay in the now. Let go of your concern for the fruits of action. Be open. Laugh. Enjoy. But let go. Some yogis get caught in an illusory state. They may have dealt with a lot of their attachments for the world. I've let go of this, I've let go of that, I've let go of such and such. But they've unconsciously held on to a whole lot of their aversions. And you get to a place where you get very nihilistic. Life just sucks. I can't stand the politics. I can't stand the people. I can't stand being in my body. I can't stand being human. I can't wait till I get realized and I get out of the body and I'm free. That's a wrong idea. That's an aversion. That kind of thing is what will impel you back until you have samadrishta, till you are at peace, right where you are. Any thoughts on this? All right, one more.
न प्रहृष्यते ति- न प्रहृष्येत् प्रियं प्राप्य नो द्विजेत् प्राप्य चाप्रियं स्थिरबुद्धिर् सम्मूढो ब्रह्मविद् ब्रह्मणि स्थितः. Resting in Brahman with steady intellect and undiluted, the knower of Brahman neither rejoices on obtaining what is pleasant, nor grieves on obtaining what is unpleasant.
So we want to understand the difference between a preference and an insistence. This is important. So I would read verses like this, and then, for example, like I'd be at dinner with Swamiji, and it was very clear that he was enjoying spicy food. You know, and he had obviously likes. He liked to drive fast in cars, be driven fast in cars. He's got desires, he's got desires. No, he had preferences. What we mean here about these likes and our dislikes are these insistences. I must have it this way in order to be happy, or I cannot have it that way, or I will be unhappy. You've got to be willing for it to be the way it is, for the rest of eternity. Then do as you choose. Again, Yoga Vasishta has a wonderful metaphor. So the foolish person who's attached to their likes and dislikes is like the person standing on the banks of the river, roasted by the sun from head to foot. But the yogi is like the person who's waded into the cool river up to their chest. And yes, their head and shoulders are still roasted by the sun, but below they are cool. So the surface part of the mind will continue to have sukham, happiness, in conducive situations, dukkam, react negatively in non-conducive situations. But there's no investment, no attachment to it. Now, we should not fool ourselves. What we need to do is understand that if I'm disturbed, no matter the cause, I'm the one with the attachment, the expectation, the identification. We want to get to the place of this samadrishta, this intense equality of mind. Keep dropping things, keep dropping it, let it go, let it go, let it go. Story just popped into my mind. Swamiji was an elegant dresser. He wore silk, this beautiful orange silk. He would wear kurtas with French cuffs, dhoti, silk dhoti. And I can't remember where we were, but a bird came by and pooped on his shoulder. And he didn't miss a beat. He just took out his handkerchief and wiped it off, went on, nothing. So understand this subtle difference between a preference and an insistence. So we want to give up all those insistences, this notion that the changing of externals is what's going to make me happy or prevent me from being upset. All right, this is a good place to stop. Any questions? Going once. Going twice. All right, let's sit.